Welcome back, everyone.
But it's okay.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We'll wait for everyone to come back in. Yep. Okay.
How are things in Israel?
Okay. Just like everyone else, just like everywhere else, I'm assuming. That's it. Last minute preparations. Oh, right. Someone else just came in. I'm trying to remember how many people. Hey, I'm trying to remember how many people we had here initially, so we know when to just go ahead and restart.
I think we had 9 altogether, including.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Here, let's get the screen back. Okay, so I'm sorry, could someone remind, where did we leave off?
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, Abraham celebrated Pesach when the 3 angels came. So is there some kind of connection or thing to have to eat matzah during this time of year that's sort of separate from Yetziat Mitzrayim?
Not that I know of. But that's an example of a midrash that where I think Chazal come and try to create a connection that will help us kind of get a bigger picture. Meaning, was he actually celebrating Pesach in the way that we're thinking about? No. So why would Chazal try to come and connect the stories? Good question. And if we were to look at that midrash of Avram and the angels, and if you would look carefully at that midrash, I don't know off the top of my head, but if we were to look carefully at that midrash, we would be able to try to figure out what are Chachamim, what are Chazal trying to do, because it doesn't say in the text that he's celebrating Pesach, obviously, okay, and doesn't actually say he's eating that it's matzah. It doesn't say matzah. So why would Chazal come and take that story that on its surface has nothing to do with Pesach? Why would Chazal insert into that story or try to kind of put onto that story this element of Pesach? Good question. And for that, we would need to look at that midrash. Just without looking at it and seeing what Chazal are hinging it on, I could think that, okay, because this is the time where he's going to learn about him having his son, Yitzchak. And the calculation of years of exile of Egypt actually start from the day that Yitzchak was born. So maybe there's a connection there, but we would have to look at that original midrash to try to figure out why Chazal are making that connection and what it might teach us about Pesach in general. But okay. Okay, the internet connection.
Rabbi.
Yes, please, Paul.
So we're asking why Rabbi Gamliel chose the leaving quickly as opposed to the Seder or the Pesach they had in the afternoon. But aren't we trying to relive the complete Exodus? And it was only after the 10th plague that they were truly free. And that's what we're marking when we sit down at the Seder. So it seems like this would be the obvious one that he would pick as opposed to the first one where it was incomplete.
Okay, if that's the case, then why are we eating maror?
Still remembering what transpired to take us to that point, but then we're taking us all the way to the freedom that the matzah represented.
Then why aren't we eating? Why isn't Mara first?
Yeah, it should be.
Rabbi, can I ask something? Maybe if we're coming back to the beginning of our shiur, and we're looking at Pesach, Matzah, that everything that was changed. So maybe it's just warning. Maybe Chazal, by changing the order of what we're supposed to eat and do and say, maybe just the warning that you're living in Eretz Israel, and if you're not going to behave the way as Hashem wants us to behave, so we will leave very quick Eretz Israel, and we will eat maror. We will come back to Egypt.
Well, that's a pretty, that's, okay, maybe, but that's a pretty depressing way to look at it, that for eternity, instead of celebrating what happened, we're going to, we're going to celebrate, we're going to not celebrate, we're going to be in a sense of dread, of like careful, of warning. Could be, but that doesn't seem to be, the night seems to be very festive, about being happy and giving thanks. There doesn't seem to be too much, foreboding or for warning or anything of that sort. But okay. Okay. Look, we discussed that last week, right? The halach ma'anya is basically saying, well, we know you're living in dark times, but even so, okay. So let's try to, okay, so we have a bunch of questions here. And I want to start answering them by looking at the last source on the page here, which is taken from the book of Melachim. And this has to do, with our first question about the Pesach, Galia, your question, which had to do with why is it named after the skipping over? So the truth is, I thought to myself, I actually have a better name for this class. I should have called this class, Why Pesach is Not Passover. Okay? Now, let's look at Melachim. Okay, this is talking about Elijah. And only after I prepared the source sheet did I think, whoa, Elijah. Elijah's also got a connection to this night, but we're going to leave that on the side for a moment. We're going to discuss here the meaning of words, okay? So Elijah is living during this period, there's mass idol worship by the hands of the Jewish people. And Elijah the prophet is basically, as a prophet, he's rebuking them, he rebukes them, and he tries to cause them to leave the idol worship and to return to exclusively Avodat Hashem. And then at some point he gathers all of the nation, or a tremendous amount of people from the nation on Mount Carmel, above Haifa. And there's this big showdown that happens there between, wait, can everyone hear me? Just a thumbs up. You guys can hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So he does this big showdown with Eliyahu Navi, Elijah on one side, and 250 false prophets of one of the idols, one of the popular idols of the time, which was called Baal. And there's this big showdown. And then Elijah says the following. Elijah approached all the people and said, how long will you keep hopping or skipping? Okay, if you look at the Hebrew, it says, Vayomer ad matai atem poschim. Here, I'll highlight it. Okay, here.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it says, poschim al, okay? How long will you keep hopping or skipping? Okay, between two opinions. If the Lord is Hashem, meaning if God is the true God, follow him. And if Baal, follow him. But the people answered him not a word. So if you look at the Hebrew, it says poschim al, not poschim me'al. In Hebrew, if it was hopping over, it should say poschim me'al, over. Al means on. Most of us, I think, know this. that the word al is on, okay, upon. So Elijah is saying to him, listen, you can't be worshiping also Baal, the idol, and also God. You can't hop back and forth. And sometimes on Mondays you're worshiping God, and on Tuesdays you're worshiping Baal. Decide, are you here or are you here? Are you with me or are you with the prophet of the Baal? Okay? Poschim al. Okay, so this translation actually is not accurate. It should be, how long will you keep hopping upon two opinions? Not over. Okay, because they're going from this worship to this worship. Now, if we go back to the sources, okay, to our verses in Shmot, okay, and if you look at verse 13, and the blood of on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass upon you, not over you, so that no plague will destroy you. Okay, verse 23, it's even stronger. For when Hashem goes through to smite the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the lintel and the two doorposts, and Hashem will pass upon the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite your home. Anyone see anything new here? Who's doing the smiting and who's doing the saving? The smiting is not being done by God. God does not smite. God saves. The plague is rampant outside, and God is going and resting upon, hopping upon the houses of the Jews who are doing the Pesach. And because God's presence is there, the plague, which is rampant, the destroyer, can't enter and kill the firstborn. This
like
is
a force field, almost.
Yes. This is exactly the opposite of what we're accustomed. We think that God is going into, so to say, going into each of the houses in Egypt. Excuse me just a second. And smiting. And he doesn't go, he refrains from entering the Jewish homes. Meaning as if the default... Wait, I'm saying, wait, just 1 second. I know there's a question. I know there's a few questions here. But that's what it seems to say. It says, if you look at the Hebrew, which I don't have here, but you know what? Let's look at Rabban Gamliel again. You'll see it in Rabban Gamliel. Okay, let's look at Rabban Gamliel. Here, I'm going to highlight it in the Hebrew and then in the English. Okay, Shepasach Hakadosh Baruch Hu al, that Hashem hopped hopped al Batei Avotenu, on their house, not over their house. And in English also, it is the Passover sacrifice for that he passed upon. Okay, that he went upon. And if you look at the verses, you see that God comes upon their houses, so the destroyer doesn't come in. What's the destroyer? The plague. I'll let you ask in just a moment. If you look at verse here, 13, and the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass upon you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Meaning, how is God striking the land of Egypt? By allowing there to be a plague. But God comes on, and he appears upon the houses of the children of Israel, so the plague cannot enter. And in verse 23 again, for when Hashem goes through to smite the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the lintel and the two doorposts, and Hashem will pass upon the door, and not let the destroyer enter and smite your home. Who's the destroyer? The plague that God allowed to happen to be in the land of Egypt. Yes, questions? Someone had a question? Galia?
Is if everything comes from God, yeah, if everything comes from God, so destroyer, he comes from God too. But it looks that there is somebody extra.
Yes, we could call it a virus. We can call it Corona. You can call it a plague of the firstborn. A plague. There's a plague rampant on the outside. It actually says later on when Moshe is relaying God's message to the children of Israel, he says, Al yetzeh ish mimkomo, that no one is to leave their home. It was forbidden because if the moment you leave your home, you are no longer protected by the presence of Hashem. But it's a reversal of what we usually think. It's not that God is going into the houses of the Egyptians to smite, and he hops over, and it's not that I'll say it like this. It is not that the absence of God protects the Jewish homes. Of course not. It's the presence of God through the observance of the mitzvot of the Pesach night. It's the presence of God that protects from the plague and from the mayhem that is rampant outside that everyone else is susceptible to. It's a complete reversal of how we usually think it. God doesn't smite, God protects. Yes, there are many things in God's world that create havoc. Yes, God allows things in the world to create havoc. Different discussion. Yes, there are things in this world that create havoc for all kinds of reasons. But it's God's presence that protects. And that is what the Pesach is saying. The Pesach is saying that it is God's presence that protects. And it is the Jewish people's active participation which creates the relationship with God that becomes the protection, becomes the presence of God and therefore the protection from the plague which is rampant outside. Yes.
We lost your Rabbi Spitz.
I'm sorry? Alex, I didn't hear. What did you say, Alex?
You were breaking up, and I know this was probably a central idea, so you may want to repeat it. I don't know about everybody else, but I heard every fifth word.
Okay, so I'll repeat.
It was choppy, yes.
What? Okay, can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm happy you told me that because it is an important point. In my mind, it's a complete reversal of what we're accustomed to. It is not that the absence, we usually think that God went in and smote the firstborn, and God did not come into the Jewish homes to smite. And that's as if we're saying the absence of God's presence protected the Jewish people. No, of course not. It's the opposite. There are many things in God's world that create havoc and that are harmful. Why does God let them exist? Good question for a different time. You guys can hear me? Just a thumbs up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's not that the absence of God protects. Of course not. It's the opposite. It's the presence of God in the Jewish homes through the observance of the mitzvot of Pesach that creates a space of God's presence which protects them from the havoc and the plague which is rampant outside. The world is filled with plagues. The world is filled with danger. And this particular...
Sorry, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Are you saying that first Pesach, the one that happens in the afternoon before the death of the firstborn, that's the protection, that observance of that first Pesach?
Yeah, but not the afternoon, evening, in the evening. Yes, they were sitting at home.
In the evening.
Yes, they're
But
sitting.
before midnight.
Yes, before midnight and continuing after midnight. They were supposed to. They were up all. They had to finish eating the korban by morning. They had to finish and consume the whole thing by morning. They had to stay up to consume it. So while they are sitting,
Not as we hold by. Sorry, Rabbi, but not as we hold with respect to the Afikomen by halachic midnight. We have to be finished. Is that
no,
the same finishing?
no. I don't think so, if I remember correctly. Not allowed to leave it till morning. No. So I know what I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm pretty sure, but I don't want to say for sure. Anyhow, so they are sitting observing the first Pesach before they've been redeemed, and that creates the presence of God who comes to visit them, who haps upon them, and that serves as the protection from the rampant plague. But again, it's not the presence of God is the protection from the havoc and the plague that is rampant. Not the absence of God. God does not go around smiting. The elements, the plague that is in God's world, God's presence protects them and saves them. So we go back. So now we go back to Rabban Gamliel, and he says the Pesach that we ate during the time of the Mikdash, or when we eat the Passover. And again, that's why Pesach is not Passover. God did not pass over the homes of the Jews. God forbid, excuse the pun. God did not pass over our homes. God passed upon. He came to our homes, and that was the protection. And what caused God's presence? The celebration of the Pesach while you're still in Egypt, celebrating the Pesach, eating the lamb, the matzah, the unleavened bread, the bitter herbs, because God commanded to as part of the redemption that is about to happen. Pesach is not Passover. He did not pass over our houses. He passed to our houses. He hopped over the Egyptians' homes to come to our houses to protect the Jewish people. And that was. Can you guys caught all that? Okay. Now we come to the matzah. Yeah, Judy, you wanted to say something? I see the box is on you, so that means you talk. Okay, we'll continue. Sorry. So that explains to us a little bit of what Rabban Gamliel is saying about the Pesach. And by the way, I don't think I need to translate it for us. Like I said, a plague rampant outside, do not leave your homes, and everyone is there just with their immediate family, right? It's supposed to be just with the immediate family. Plague is rampant outside, and creating a space of observance and belief in the redemption that is about to happen, which then creates a meeting with Hashem, and Hashem coming to visit, so to say, the presence of God, which becomes a protection. This is like, I don't think you need to go that far to see this in the text, which is amazing. New things come up, and suddenly, like, you see an old text that you've seen 100 times, and it's like, it's just been sitting here waiting to be read and learned this way. Okay, let's continue to the matzah. So we have our question. Yes, Paul. Ron, sorry.
The question I had was, wouldn't there be today there would be a question of faith for the Orthodox in Israel, because the coronavirus is hitting hardest in places where you have like Bnei Brak, or where the most fervent, religious, observant Jews you would think should be protected in 2020 through their faith, through their prayers, and they're not. So if we look at what happened in Egypt, you'd think, because in Spain, less Jews died from the Black Plague, and they thought the Jews must have started it because now they less died because they buried them sooner and they washed their hands. But maybe there was some protection that Jews had, but Jews aren't being protected. New York City, Orthodox areas in New York have higher incidence of coronavirus, and in Israel, it seems to me that would be something that would shake their faith.
So let's. I don't know what will be the results of this within the ultra-Orthodox world. Will it have a long-standing effect on how they view, religious observance, or maybe it will have an effect on how they observe, how they see their rabbis. Some of whom instructed not to close schools. When the government said they should. Will it change the way they look at the laws of the state and the authority and the know-how of secular scientists? I don't know. I don't know. I could easily see some of these things happening, but also maybe not. I don't know. Could be. It'll be. I've been wondering the same thing. Okay, now we're going to the matzah.
It's a very.
Sorry. Yeah.
Just on that Ron's point, I guess it's a very philosophical question, but Hashem still works within nature as well. So if you have large gatherings of people, then the virus spreads because of that, and so you'd have to have a miracle for it not to result in more exposure.
Right.
But at what point is that crossover between keeping the mitzvah's results in that equation versus the nature of do you have to do with respect to natural law? And then once you've done that, perhaps we'll be protected more if we keep faith and keep the mitzvah. I don't know.
You're right. Big question that has to do, that it very much connects to what we're discussing, but goes beyond our scope at the moment. But yeah.
Because I think each of us is still trying to do, we're here now to learn Torah because we think, not just because it's what draws us, but it's also to some extent a protection. We're going to keep Pesach the best way we can. Try and dominate. Within the law of not exposing us more to the natural law.
Right.
It seems like you have to do both.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Meaning, it's not enough.
Carl, the point here, the Israelites were protected. The plague was all around them, so it's not. We can't cut it both ways and say, well, we have to have faith. The plague did not enter their homes. The plague is entering the homes and people in Bnei Brak as an example.
Yes, I guess the difference is the natural law, as Hashem said it in Mitzrayim that night, was if you put blood on the doorpost, it will protect you. It's like the government saying if you stay in your house, it will protect you. But it was what was the natural law at the time. And keeping mitzvahs now without obeying the natural law may not work now. I don't know.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Okay, let's continue because we have 9 more minutes before we get cut off again. So let's see if we can, and I'm not sure we'll be able to touch upon all the points that we left open, but that's fine. Okay, so we discussed the Pesach, okay? It's almost the opposite of what we usually think. And again, I think it's a very, very fundamental statement. And also, if you think about it, it's unfathomable to think otherwise. To think that the absence of God's presence is a protection. Of course not. It's God's presence that serves as a protection, and God's absence that exposes a person, in this case the Egyptians, or those who didn't observe, exposes them to the plague. And what is it that creates God's Poseach al, hopping upon the houses of the Jewish people? The observance of this Seder happening in Egypt, celebrating the redemption that they're standing on the eve of, that didn't even happen fully yet. It's a tremendous statement in there. Okay, then we come to the matzah, and we come to the question of why is it that Rabban Gamliel says the matzah that we eat is not based on the matzah that was eaten during that first Seder, but the matzah that they did not have enough time to do. So this one is I'm not sure I have as good of an answer to. So I'd be happy to hear thoughts. And I think, Paul, maybe you said something about this before, but I think it has to do with the fact that that Pesach that we did over there, that cannot be all of it. There was something very fundamental about that. That was a very powerful statement that the Jewish people were making that resulted in the first stage of this, of seeing everything around them fall apart and them creating this sanctum. It's important to understand, until this 10th plague, the Jewish people were not called upon to do anything. Throughout the 9 plagues, they were completely passive. They did not actively do anything to deserve, to earn anything of what was happening. The Egyptians were being punished, period. This was the first time that they were called upon to do something active, to participate in what's happening to them. Again, big statement there. But when it comes to, when Rabban Gamliel comes and says, which matzah is more significant? Now that they've done the Pesach in Egypt, okay, and there's something about the matzah, something that they were not prepared for. That they had 2 weeks to prepare for that. They had 2 weeks to prepare and make the unleavened bread like they were told, and they were told to do it, and they finally have a chance to do something active. But then in the last second, they're told, and there's something about going from, there's something about the being surprised, not being able to be prepared, not being able to have everything under control. They had everything under control in the first Seder. It was tense. There were tense times. There's a plague outside. It's scary, but you've been told for 2 weeks, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to get. This is what you need to buy at the store. This is what you need to, this is when you need to do it. This is who you need to do it with. This is the order of things. And even though it was very tense and very dramatic, they had time to prepare. And they did it. And now comes the moment to say, okay, everyone. We only have 5 more minutes. So let's try. I'm going to try to jump forward a little bit. So I apologize. To come and say, okay, now you need to think fast. You need to be on the go. You need to be able, and matzah, and I'm going a little quick here, so I'm just going to throw out some last few ideas. I apologize. That matzah in its essence is, what is it? It's water and flour that doesn't have time to rise. Take things as they are and run with it. Be okay taking the bread and the flour and not taking the time to, because there's a big difference between matzah that you meant to make. I meant to have a cracker, okay? Because I need to have a cracker, because I want to have a cracker, versus having no choice. And I just can take the basics and run with it. And there's something about, and Rabban Gamliel says, after that first that Pesach that we celebrated there, which was a creating, being active and creating the ability to meet Hashem and therefore be protected from the elements around, comes, we're told on the spot, go, 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 and just as you are, with what you have, and that's enough, and go with it, and go, and it'll be okay, and trust Hashem, and trust it'll be okay. And even if you didn't have time to prepare, and you're missing things in your house, and you're missing things in your lives, and you don't have all the people around you, and you don't have all the things that are supposed to be there, that you would usually plan for, and being able to have that relationship with Hashem, which is to go into the desert without, just as is, with what you have, that's the next stage. Okay, we only have 3 more minutes. Then comes the Mor. Then comes the Mor, And this I find to be amazing. This is an idea, a lot of this is based on Rav Kook. And he comes and says, it doesn't say here that we eat maror to remember the slavery. It doesn't say that. Because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt, we do this not to remember, and this goes to what Gallia was saying. This is not like a childish thing. Oh, they embittered, so we don't want to forget that they embittered us. It's we want, this is what Rav Kook says, we want to experience bitterness. And Rav Kook says the following. He says, after you experience the tremendous the presence of Hashem in Egypt and being saved from the plague, being spared the plague, and after you leave with that rush of like all at once, just go. After all the preparation, everything. Okay, now that's it. You just need to just do a cut and go. And the transference from being a slave to freedom, you can prepare all you want, but at some point, the transition is all at once, because there's a fundamental change here. It's like a baby. You go from being in the womb to being outside the womb. There's a point, at some point, that's it. You're alive. Or God forbid, the opposite. There's 1 second beforehand the person is alive, and then this birth happens all at once. That's the matzah. Just comes out, you just go out all at once. But the maror comes and says, I think we're going to have to re-enter because it's too intense. The maror comes and says, we don't, it's not just, because it's not a childish thing of like, so we don't forget what had. No, we want to experience bitterness because Rav Kook says the following. He says, because after the redemption and all these great things, we still have a very, very long way to go. And it's difficult. There's still a lot of work. We're going to receive Torah. We're going to travel through the desert. We're going to reach the land. We're going to build Bet HaMikdash. Bet HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. This is only the beginning of Jewish history.
Do you want us to reconnect, Rabbi?
Yeah, I think so. It's a shame not to.
Okay, sorry, but
when we disconnect, we'll connect again in just a few seconds.
Few more minutes.
So
thank you.
This is just the beginning of Jewish history. What